So hello everyone, I'm Umair, another episode of Better Tech, and today we have James with us. We'll talk about his journey, his startup, where they are, what are their audience, for whom they're working, etc., etc. And it's going to be an interesting conversation. So welcome on the show, James.
Thanks ever so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't you take the initial few minutes and introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, your journey. I looked at your LinkedIn profile. Seems like you have wore different hats, both like sales and engineering, and you had a degree in economics. So a lot of pretty kind of mixed stuff. So would be interesting in hearing about your journey as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm James. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Posthog. We're an open source product operating system. Basically, if you're building a product, we try and give you all of the tools you'll need in one place to measure your performance, like how many users do I have, which features are they using, and so on. What are my activation rates, to diagnose it. So we give you things like session recording to help you watch videos, replays of users using your stuff. And we give you feature flags and experimentation to help you ship changes and learn. My background is we started, Posthog as a company started just before COVID in kind of January 2020 during YC. The background, story is my co-founder and I used to work together at a previous place, and I was the VP of sales at an enterprise software company. We're selling like $1 to $5 million a year kind of software contracts. And I had like a kind of a technical background before as well. And my co-founder was just the best engineer that I'd ever worked with. And one day, he quit, and I was like, oh crap, Tim's left. I really want to work with him again. And so within about 10 seconds of hearing this news, I took him out for a drink, and I was like, well, kind of want to keep working together. I have this idea for a problem we could solve. And then kind of what happened next was we spent 6 months or so working together, and he decided not to take this new job offer that he had, and we started working out of cafes in London with no money, no customers or anything, trying to get something off the ground. We had no fewer than 6 failed ideas before Posthog over those 6 months. We basically launched an average of a startup a month until we found something that landed. And what we learned in the early days was, because we pivoted so many times, every single time we pivoted building a new software product of some type or another, we got really fed up setting up the whole stack of tools to understand its usage, and to try and understand what users were doing. And eventually we thought, actually, we kind of want to solve this meta problem of understanding our own users better. So let's go for that one. Instead, we got into ycombinator, which is a big startup accelerator in San Francisco, with one of the previous ideas.
You were part of 2020 cohort or what?
Yeah, so the W 2021. We did that January, February, March 2020. Okay. It was the last in-person one just before, and COVID kind of hit and cancelled demo day, which is a shame. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We went there, pivoted once more in the batch, and started building Posthog there. But it was an awesome experience. The two of us moved in together. And one of the quotes at the start of the program was, "This gives you a socially acceptable reason to do nothing other than work for 3 months," which was very true. I had a pregnant wife at home at the time. She's now now we have a 2.5-year-old. And it just meant hey, look, I'm going to push as hard as I possibly can. And the whole way through, you're supposed to have all this pressure that at the end of this, so the format is it's a 3-month program. At the end of the program, you do a demo day where 1,000 investors show up, and you need to have made a bunch of progress during the program so you can then raise your seed round using this demo day to pitch. So everyone's very stressed about this demo day. Whereas for me, I was I've left my pregnant wife at home. I better be able to justify my existence over here working on the computer all the time. So I was much more okay, I need that. That's kind of why I'm here, really. And so yeah, we just worked totally constant. It was completely unsustainable, but we were working from 9 a.m. to 1 in the morning, 6 days a week, until we got Posthog off the ground. Like we pivoted in the batch, had this realization, actually we want to solve this problem.
So your co-founder was is a technical guy,
Yeah.
and your personal experience is more like towards in the sales and marketing and business development. So
Yeah,
what were you doing together in the product development phase? I mean, you were kind of his tester or idea generator guy. I mean,
I would describe myself as a bad developer that escaped outside. So yeah, like actually, like a really long time ago, when I was doing my degree at academic economics, but during my degree, I basically had decided that I wanted to be a professional cyclist. So I used to race bikes for a living, and so I kind of did that full time after I graduated.
Ever raced Tour de France or something?
Sorry, say again. Yeah, that kind of thing. Like there's like several tiers to professional cycling. I was very much like trying to get into the bottom rung of three. Tour de France, there's like Tour de France, there's a tier below, and then there's one tier below that. And I was trying to get to the bottom of those three, and it is brutally hard. So yeah,
I mean, cycling is brutally hard. I mean,
yeah, anything like basically anything that people do as a hobby that isn't at a desk is probably something that is incredibly painful to make money at. Is my learning there. So yeah, we kind of whilst I was doing that, I used to do web development in the evenings to make some extra cash, and wound up getting like a full-time job, just working for a tiny company. So I have got like a background in coding, but my background's like kind of a bit embarrassing. Like it's a lot of dated technologies that we wouldn't use now, but it's been very useful. I worked for a couple of startups. I wound up like bootstrapping a company to like a few million a year. Then wound up running marketing and then being the VP of sales at an enterprise software company somehow, and then just sort of learning enterprise sales as we went. But having a more technical background has always been incredibly, and I'm sure you must have seen the same thing. It's been incredibly helpful. So I mean, the diversification and the background and the diversification and it gives you a lot of exposure. I mean, you understand how the engineering works, you understand how the business works, how the marketing and sales needs to work. So wonderful there. So I mean, but I mean, the product Hog, as I see it, it's a very involved, technical kind of a product. So talk to us a little bit more about its features and how do you really come up with the idea? Why you really thought that it's going to be successful, and then talk to us more about the product Hog, your product. Sure. Yeah. So we start off with building an open source project. So you've got to start somewhere. Our platform is incredibly broad. So a big part of kind of what we're doing in the market is there's a ton of tools that help you do product analytics. There are different ones for session recording. There are different ones for feature flags and experimentation. And what we could see is that teams are using all of these things combined, and there are other tools that exist to stitch all these things together. And when we looked at it, we're like, oh, this is just a mess. Like the fact there are tools that exist to just be the glue between tools means that it's going to be like, there are problems with data integration. So you'll have issues between like, okay, do you have data parity between all these different systems? It creates a lot of data engineering workload. Teams put a massive amount of effort to try and kind of shuffle data between different systems, and it's always problematic. And the second is it's just really confusing from a user perspective. Like you've got to log into multiple places. It's not very intuitive. But the problem with this is like, okay, well, how do you like do this? Like you can't just build all the stuff on day one. You have to start somewhere. So we start off by just building an open source project to do product analytics. So it's totally free, like permissively licensed, so anyone in the world can use it. They can even host it and charge money for it if they want to. We built this like open source project. All it did is it tells you how many users you have, like which features they're using. It lets you understand different groups of users, you know, like people in a certain demographic, perhaps if you've got like profile information on them, or people who've like used a particular feature, whatever it may be. And you can produce things like, you know, daily active user numbers, conversion rates, and so on. So we basically spent just 4 weeks to get this free project out onto the internet and documented. And so kind of our roles were, Tim is much more technical, is much stronger technically than I am. And so the way we kind of optimized when there was just two of us was Tim wrote code all day and I did literally everything else. So I was like doing shopping and cooking, as well as also like I did like the whole website, the documentation.
I tell people that being a CEO of a startup, you are actually a chief everything officer, not the executive officer. You have to, I mean, literally do everything.
Yeah, I was like,
do whatever it takes.
One of the talks, we went to a talk when we did YC. We went to a talk with the founders of Airbnb, and one of the points they were making, I think it was 2 designers and 1 developer.
Yeah.
And the 2 designers were like, we just need to do everything we can to make sure the developer stays because we can't build this without him. It felt a little bit like that. I was like, okay, Tim has got like an awful lot to build here. So I was trying to do stuff like, I created like mock-ups in Figma of how all the different sections of the product should look. The other cool thing actually was it gave us the chance to, I was also trying to get like early users signed up. So I was like texting my friends, trying to see if any of them would let us set up for real. So we really tried to focus on building to production.
Let me ask that question specifically because that's an interesting. I looked at the product and it said that you guys probably grew out of the, by penetrating it into various developer communities, right? And talk to us about a little bit about your how you did go about early user acquisition, how it really went viral. I mean, how many people are using it, and what's your go-to-market user acquisition strategy to start with, and how it worked out.
Yeah. So I think the first one was that we focused. So before you can't do anything else, it's like, who you're trying to build for, and it's got clearer with hindsight, but the person I think we were building for was a product engineer. So we kind of wanted to build for not an engineer who follows orders, but an engineer who is involved in the decision making around what to build, or perhaps even driving the decision making. And again, I think it's a trend that much more of this is now happening, where a lot of very high growth companies, if you look at the way their engineering teams work, product is not a dictatorship. Engineers have a lot of extra context and they can bring a ton of value to decisions around kind of what to ship. And there's a bit of a trend, like if you look in YC, for example, at the thing that really struck me about the founders at YC is that they were all really technical, but all of them could talk to people and were like, they were easy to talk to, rather than being kind of the stereotype of a developer as someone who's like hidden away in a basement somewhere. And so we're kind of building for that sort of person. And we're like, okay, where do these people, like, where do they hang out? So really simplistically, like first month, we're like, okay, we just need to build like for my friends. Like I'm not going to try and get like totally random people on the internet really teach this thing. I'm just gonna, like, I think if we build into production, it will create a bunch of edge cases that we won't see until we do like a big launch later. So like, let's just try and build with like, we'll get a handful of companies using it that are very friendly. So we kind of did that for the first month. Then we just posted the link to the GitHub repo because
I will be a little skeptical putting in someone's code in my code if I'm creating a production ready system, and while that company is a startup, because I don't know whether they're going to exist like 3 months down the road or not. So putting their code within my code and then refactoring it all the time if they just go out of business. So I mean, how you cross that initial hump?
Sure. So we kind of have the concept of a pre-mortem. So like, what are all the reasons why this wouldn't work or wouldn't be used or whatever? And that was definitely one of them. I think being open source mitigates that quite successfully. Like if it doesn't quite work, you can just tweak it yourself.
By the way, is it still open source and free?
So now we have a paid offering as well. So we have like a cloud version where we just host it for you, which we charge for, which is often much cheaper for people. And we have paid extra functionality if you want to self-host that you can like bolt on and pay for as well. So we still have an open source project that's massive and like very, very powerful, but there's like a bunch of extra stuff that we monetize. We generally try and make it free for hobbyists. But if you've got kind of funding or you're a real company, we'll usually be charging you something for it, is our general philosophy. But we kind of want it to be free for hobbyists forever.
Okay, so we'll come to that part again, but something to my mind that when you started off like a couple of years ago, and you said that you were coding. So what time did it take for you to get your MVP out, and how many engineers were there? And then over the last 2 years, what kind of engineering team have you kind of assimilated, assembled that is now taking this product forward?
Sure. Yeah. So we've gone from nothing and no code or anything. Like January the 22nd, 2020 was the first line of code. No customers or anything. Here we are, like nearly 3 years later. We now have about 20,000 customers.
When you say 20,000 customers, is it 20,000 companies or 20,000 developers companies or engineers using your companies? Oh.
A lot of them are free, but we have got like we're doing like millions of dollars a year in revenue. Our next goal is like we're trying to get towards 10 million run rate at the moment. as our next kind of goal. We're trying to get to 100 million by 2026. And we're just tracking towards that. We optimize for like month-over-month growth rate with revenue. We're picking up lots of like $70,000 a year. It's kind of our sweet spot. All self-serve. So we don't have an outbound sales team. The magic of doing something open source is that we don't have any outbound sales at all. So the whole model is inbound and driven by the initial project and kind of word of mouth, and trying to do more of the things that drive word of mouth growth. So we've ended up with a really unusual go-to-market that's really, really efficient. But it lets us kind of use the money we save there to like double down in the product and make the product much broader and wider. But it all basically came from like just putting an open source project on Hacker News, which is a popular forum for like kind of slightly entrepreneurial developers. And that gave us the initial traction we needed. But
seems like a very, very, very good example of a PLG or product-led growth, as they call it. I mean, you are building a product, and that product is actually, because it was free, open source, it initially started attracting a lot of users, and then some of these are getting converted into now paid users, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So do you have any plans to, or I mean, now the companies like yourself or etc. I mean, Zapier is another one which does a lot of automation and so on and so forth. But these large platforms, they eventually create their partnership programs where they incentivize companies to bring more customers or partners onto their platform. So do you have any kind of that into the plans, or you still want to keep growing it through this inbound channel?
Yeah, I think this may change, but like I think in an ideal world, that I think that is how we would end up tackling the enterprise at some point. So because I think we're it may or may not work, but our current vision is like basically, apologies, it may or may not work, but our current plan is, can we get to 100 million run rate without any extra people doing sales? We have 2 people that deal with inbound, that are taking calls, answering customers' questions if we can't handle it somewhere. And we're like, okay, can we have just those 2 people scale us all the way to 100 million by instead working on like the documentation, the self-serve kind of experience, and pushing. What I'd love to be able to do is layer on top of this. Like, okay, cool. We just want to provide the core technology. Other people can build on. The cool thing about open source is it's ultra extensible. So if you're kind of like a system integrator or a third party, you can customize the platform completely. So you can do things like you can build apps on top of Posthog. So we've seen teams build like their own data connectors, if user does X in my product, trigger Y in Salesforce, or do a complex connection with the data warehouse or whatever. So we do think, and like you can also self-host this in your infrastructure. So we think in the long run, there's a very good potential fit in enterprise around this, but we'd personally, if I had to pick right now, I would absolutely pick like that to be completely partner, like 100% partner driven, in order that we can keep putting like, I kind of want like 90% of the company to be product design engineering, and just stay focused. Like there's so much to build, our product is so broad already, there's so much to cope with that I would rather just double down on that stuff. And I think it would lead to a faster growth rate. Currently, kind of this year, we're trying to just nail mid-market to get us to our next revenue milestone, because it's just meaning that the product quality is going up a lot. And because it's not very old, like we're 3 years old, we're trying to get to a standard where now we're kind of on par with each of our individual product areas with our competitors, but we're starting to integrate them all together, and we're improving things like
you raise funding and you raise CPC. I mean, what you using this funding for? Is it to hire more engineers so that you can develop more product functions that can actually perpetuate the growth or something like that? So what is you're putting this funding used for? I mean,
sure.
What is the user?
Yeah, so engineering basically. Like our plan is, there's a wide range of products. It's wider than we currently are, that teams use to make their own product more successful. And we want to build all of them. And so the way we're basically seeing that, like at the moment we have like 4 or 5-ish kind of key product areas. There are many more tools next door to us that we'd like to incorporate. And what we're seeing is teams will show up for one of our use cases and then they'll stay for like all of the others. And what we're trying to do is push back we're never going to replace the entire stack of things that someone might be using. Like we're not going to replace a data warehouse anytime soon for like a late stage company. But for an early stage one, we push back the time they need until they might adopt something. And we're just trying to push back this timeline until they start needing anything else, just further and further until they never have to. So yeah, we're using funding to maintain quality in each of the individual product areas in the platform, and then to bolt kind of new ones on over time. I think it's self-perpetuating. Like the wider we get, the more appealing the platform is to people. Like, hey, it just does like everything here. So it's becoming a very obvious choice for developers. And then funding lets us like push harder, so we have more of a moat there as we get wider and wider really quickly. So yeah, if we raise like another fundraising round, I'm pretty confident it would be to add more product areas to the platform. Which, there's some supporting like that too, like the underlying infrastructure and stuff. Like we have huge volumes of events.
Yes, because you're already quite a bit of revenue positive. So it seems like you probably don't need funding, and you normally people use funding to scale. And your marketing is more like an inbound and sales like an inbound. So I was wondering why you're using that funding. I mean, it seems like you're
having a really inbound motion like this is kind of awesome and quite intellectually challenging because it's really efficient. Like our CAC payback period, which is like a metric, like how long does it take us to pay back each like $1 million of revenue, is like 2 months, whereas on average it's like around 12 months is normally seen as very good, because it's so efficient, but it's a bit harder to know. So it's like very leveraged, but it's a bit like the levers are in fog, where you don't quite know what you can pull to like guarantee or grow twice as fast or return as fast. That's starting to become clearer to us as we're getting bigger, and we've just got a lot more data now on what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of, we're actually finding that literally improving the product leads to faster growth, because our existing customers expand into the new product areas, and it widens the acquisition funnel we have because there are more reasons to want to use Posthog in the first place.
Who's your competitor in the space?
Who isn't is probably an easier question to answer. I think so in product analytics, Amplitude's the market leader, I think. So basically Amplitude, Pendo, Mixpanel, Heap are kind of the main ones we see coming up. In session recording, probably Full Story, there's also LogRocket, feature flags experimentation, like Launch Darkly, Optimizely a little bit, but we're a bit more product focused and less marketing team focused. So, and then we have some stuff we're also kind of competitive a little bit with like Segment in the CDP area, because we connect all these things up with each other. And some teams use us basically as a data warehouse. So with us, it's a bit of a choice. It's kind of like, what tends to happen is it's like, do you want to like consolidate a bunch of things into one place? In which case, we're the right choice. If you want like absolutely the deepest possible functionality in an individual area, like you shouldn't be picking us. So just go to one of these tools that is like only does that one thing. We think the latter will reduce over time because we think there are integrated use cases between all these tools that we can provide that others won't be able to, but we haven't built all those yet. Like for example, like, I've got like a funnel. So imagine you're a product manager or an engineer and you're trying to improve like your sign up rate, in your activation rate in your products. We can give you the funnel showing you like, okay, like you have a 20% activation rate, but we want you in like one keyboard shortcut to then be able to watch video replays of users like failing to activate through that funnel. And now you've got all the context for why your metrics are bad. And then we want you to press another button to release an experiment to change your activation flow, and then measure the impact of the change. So we think we can take you through this kind of whole iterative cycle of development in a way that the others won't be able to, but we have work to do. At the moment, it feels a bit too much like multiple separate products, and we're trying to pull everything together. So yeah, like we're like lightly competitive with a very wide number of companies. But it's good for us. Like they've created the categories, they've demonstrated product market fit for each.
This is actually all very inspiring and wonderful story. So if I interview again at the end of 2023, where would the company be?
Well, at that point we should. I think I'm pretty sure we'll be profitable at that point. We're default live today.
What will be your revenue range by then?
I don't think we market this one publicly, but we're getting very close to 10 million is my guess. I don't think our team size will be much larger. We're under 40 people. I think we're about 36-ish, but we're really, really at the moment trying not to add headcount in order that, because we frankly don't feel like we need to right now. We're trying to do some quite big projects around our UX. Basically, the other big change, which, as a more technical person by background, you'll care about is everything should be in dark mode and everything should be keyboard shortcut driven. That's really like one of the other goals, where it's like a layer of polish on top of what's already going on. is what we're trying to get into the product. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm kind of yeah, I think probably like in terms of customer numbers and stuff, like revenue grew 6 times last year. Again, if we can like triple or something, I'm not sure what's going to be possible. Like we may go way beyond what we're hoping if it's anything like last year was. But we'll see. But we're excited.
I think, James, you have an inspiring story, and I think the company is going great. So, and that is a wonderful news for anyone who's in a startup business. So congratulations to all the success that you have reached so far, and all the best wishes for the future success. So thank you very much for being on our show today.
Likewise, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.